I guess if I had to narrow it down, I'd have to say people rallying together and working together for something, well, working together for our survival, which is what we saw it as. And working together for the future generations that would come after us, and for the children that people had. I myself don't have children, but I have animals, and there's not a day, I don't think, that goes by when I don't walk out here and look up and think, God, what would it look like if that incinerator had come here? You know, and what would life be like? What would the quality of life? And I'm just, and I watch the seasons change, and I watch the leaves every year go away and come back, and it's so beautiful, and I'm just always so grateful, you know, that it didn't. But I'm also sad for the places where it is, and it's I guess just that people cared enough to come together and believe that we can win. One other thing I think that really contributed to it was that we had a visible presence. And I think that happened when we created our Nat t-shirts, because we didn't even have to say a word. When we'd show up in Nat t-shirts, it was like we had respect. They stepped back, and even after it didn't come here and it went to other counties, we could show up, and we did. I remember one particular day, there were only 5 of us, but we had our Nat t-shirts on in Northampton County, and it was like, okay, we don't want to deal with them. And we because of our belief and our commitment, and because we were visible, and I think that was a lot of it. We were visible. We had the shirts, we had the theatrics, we had whatever it took, you know, to make a splash in the media, which was not our objective, but that's what it took to let them know that we were there. And they knew that we were there, and that they could see us. And there may not have been that many of us that were actually part of the Granville Nonviolence Action Team, but they didn't know that. We represented so many thousands of people that couldn't put the shirt on, people that couldn't be visible because they had jobs that wouldn't allow that, but they knew that we were out there. And I think that maybe that and rallying together would probably be the single thing that led to our victory.
The greatest force just had to be the unity of the people. We were poor. We didn't have a lot of money to put into a campaign to fight it. It was just pure blood and guts, sweat and tears. That's all there is to it. It was just the energy of the people. Probably 2 things, and although this many years later they seem so insignificant, at the time I think they were really important, and that was the hundreds and hundreds of bows. I can remember me and one of my employees, I drove the van, and she would sit by the door on the side of the van, and we had the van just piled up with bows. And I'd stop at every telephone pole, and she'd hop out and staple the bow up, hop back in, and we'd ride to the next one. And we did that for several days. And I think the other thing was the signs that we made to sell as a fundraiser. I'll never forget how they looked lined up in the field here by the shop, and we did hundreds of them, and then seeing them all sell, and then riding around the county and seeing, you know, oh, I made that one, or just seeing them all over the place. And that, you know, it was just so obvious that it was a successful project.
Just in general, I'm proud to have been a part of it. At first, I was real apprehensive at first. I'd never been involved in anything like that, and I wasn't sure that I really wanted to be. But then when once I got involved, you just couldn't get out of it. I mean, you were dealing with your future. Probably the biggest contribution I made on something, I think, the effigy thing. I enjoyed that. It scared me to death at times because I thought they're going to lock me up for sure. But that was probably the highlight of what I did there. And I'm just glad that I was a part of it and stayed through the whole thing, because in the end it was worth it. It was a great high.
When I saw the governor and I knew what he was trying to do to his state and our state, it really infuriated me. And I began to express my feelings. He was supposed to be there to protect us as people, and I didn't feel like he was doing that. He was putting up screens and making us believe things that weren't really there. So I kind of let him know that.
So you got pretty close to the governor that day.
Yeah, face to face. Pretty close.
How did that feel?
Uh,
You're scared?
I'm kind of a quiet person, but I was ready to say something. I just wasn't going to sit back and let somebody run me out of my own county because I had that much fear. I felt like I had to protect my family and other families in the community, and by speaking out, that was one way of doing that. If we don't speak out and we don't stand up for what we feel is right, we lose what we've worked for all of our lives. I had worked hard to raise my family in a home that was about paid for, and I felt like they were running me out of that because I wasn't going to stay in a place where I couldn't feel safe.
John Pike had the insight, along with the help of a girl uptown, when she recommended that somebody find some land and let a lot of people buy it and tie it up so the state would have a hard time condemning it. And John Pike essentially almost closed his law office for a year. His wife Priscilla, which is a very good friend of mine, she worked side by side with him. And he went up north with Steve Royster, or one of the Roysters' help, the lawyer that was looking after some land called Jones land now. And he set it up, and we sold shares and paid for the land. And today it's well on the way to becoming an environmental park in this county.
The long and short of it is it worked. It's probably the only thing that did. They would have, as the site review committee person, we threw out literally hundreds of viable reasons not to site it there, and they ignored every one of them. They found reasons to avoid it. Even if it didn't meet the statutory requirements, they said, we'll change the statute or we'll change the rules and to suit ourselves. But again, when we did that, we bought the land. Priscilla and I borrowed $70,000 from Adams Tobacco Company, who were heroes because they loaned it to me on my personal guarantee. They were going to end up with nothing but a deed to a piece of land that would have thousands of signatures on it. So they took a great risk too, and because they didn't want their tobacco contaminated. So they were an unusual hero in this, although their interests were the same as the regular citizenry.